I actually caught a drug charge here in the state last June, and it really saved my life. It got me into this program. I've been going through here I've been here since March 2nd, and things are going pretty good.
Yeah, Jeffrey's one of many Mainers that suffer from drug addiction, and luckily he's in a program now where he can get some help. In his own words, he was put in that position largely because of an arrest, and I think there's some pending legislation here in Maine that could negatively affect how law enforcement deals with this drug epidemic. The legislation, there was an attempt at this a couple of years ago in the Maine legislature that nearly mirrored Measure 110 in Oregon that was passed a few years back that decriminalized hard drugs out there. And we decided to reach out to officials in Oregon, police officials out there and prosecutors, to find out what the effect was on the drug problem in that state. And as you'll see, the results weren't good.
Well, a lot of things happened. The tools that law enforcement had to get people into some level of compliance with drug consumption, we lost all tools for it. The writers of the law would say that, well, no, you still can write them a ticket, and if they step up and engage in treatment options, then we'll dismiss that ticket. Well, if you dealt with any addict that is really deep in their addiction, most people go, I'm not interested. They almost have to be forced towards treatment. This law took all of that away. There is absolutely no pressure from the system, the criminal justice system, to get them into compliance.
But what we have is a massive influx of people coming to the area that are heavy drug users, and there's such a supply that we've seen that kind of cartel influence come back to try to satisfy that demand. So we've definitely seen a growth in our houseless population. We've seen a growth in our user base population, our people that are suffering from substance abuse. All of those numbers have gone up since Ballot Measure 110.
If you care about the citizens at all, if you care about the security of the citizens or the peace of the community, then this bill can't be passed. You have to fight against this bill. Drugs are already a problem. They're already in the country. There's already enough fentanyl in the country to kill every human that's brought in every year. Decriminalizing drugs just increases exponentially that problem, and you can't keep up with it. The Measure 110 or similar measure in other states are not going to help.
I think that there is a trend across the country, first starting with legalization of marijuana, which is not the same drug it is today that it was in the 60s and 70s. And it's normalized other drug usage. And I'm concerned that the well-meaning people who voted for this legislation did not realize the havoc that it would bring to our state. I come home to Maine every year. I view Oregon and Maine as my two home states. My father still lives out there. I care about the state of Maine. But frankly, I would do this for any state. I care for any state who is thinking about legalizing drugs without a concurrent and very high quality plan to make sure that you help people with addiction.
Our overdoses and overdose deaths are through the roof. We'll surpass what we did last year. We're on track to get over 125 overdose calls this year. Last year we had 89. Not a good situation. Now I think states that do still have a criminal element to personal use are seeing a increase in fentanyl overdoses, but I think it's much worse in the state of Oregon because it's just a free market for people to use.
And be prepared to have shortages of police officers, because the crime rate is going to increase to such a high rate that we've seen such a spike in crime that we can't respond in a timely fashion to get to all the crime that's available. We don't have enough police officers. That's kind of a different issue, but because of the increase in the crime rate, and it's across the board. It's car thefts, burglaries, retail theft. All of those places, like we're having retailers leave our community at kind of staggering rates. They're closing their doors because they can't stay open due to theft.
And the legislation is recognizing that the measure failed. That even they say that they understand that hasn't helped anything, but they follow that up with it needs more time. My concern is that you create addicts over time with drugs on the street. My concern has always been that curious teenager that now isn't being taught that drugs will destroy your life, and it's out there and it's no longer bad because the government doesn't say it's bad. So giving it more time is just going to create more addicts in my mind.
In my career of almost 25 years, I have not seen many people really address their addiction problems. And I think alcohol addiction is very different than addiction to hard drugs. I have not seen a successful transition to a sober life without some sort of potential for incarceration or other, circumstances that would make them not want to return to a life of addiction. I want to stress, I think it's a complex problem. I think our country is facing a complex problem of homelessness, mental health crisis, drug addiction, but I don't think that the solution is simply lifting the barriers to continued use of more and more controlled substances.
I come from a family of alcoholics and addicts, and I can speak that some relatives respond to the carrot, which is I don't want to be in this lifestyle, so I'm going to take advantage of a treatment. And I've also had relatives that it wasn't until they spent a little bit of chunk of time in jail getting clean and sober that they realized this is not the life that they want. So they engage in a lifestyle change. And that was brought about by incarceration. By decriminalizing the personal use of drugs, you're taking away that latter tool of people who will benefit from incarceration if they can't get involved in diversion.
It literally took me getting arrested to get into a program. And I feel like for some people, that's what it's going to take. I woke up, when I was in active use, I woke up day after day wanting to get help. But honestly, the drugs was an easier solution. It was easier, it was faster, it was right there. It took me getting arrested to stop me.
I am all for rehabilitation and recovery and treatment, but you can't just do it in a vacuum, and people aren't going to just necessarily do it on their own. So there has to be some sort of system that includes accountability, deterrence, and treatment. I think they're well-intentioned, but they're not going to lead to positive results. I was one of 5 Democrats in the Senate 2 years ago that helped kill the decriminalization bill then, and I will oppose it now. We're not prepared to have decriminalization. We don't have all the treatment. We don't have all the management. We can't just let people who are shooting up or snorting cocaine or heroin or fentanyl just a free license.
Luckily, Senator Baldacci and some others at the other lawmakers at the state level also oppose this. When we began doing our initial research and reached out to our counterparts in Oregon, we were somewhat shocked to find out just how bad the situation was out there. Across the board, it was it was increase in thefts, increase in property crimes in general, an increase in violent crimes, sharp increase in overdoses, both fatal and non-fatal, a huge increase in child endangerment cases. Basically everything that would be, we believe would be bad for the state of Maine. And it's really important to know too that we don't oppose diverting people from the criminal justice system. But what you have in Oregon and the law that was proposed in Maine a couple of years back doesn't really do that. It's essentially giving people a free pass, and You know, if we could design a system where folks had the option of going to some type of treatment program, like a court-ordered diversion, we would be all for that. We ultimately want to see people get better. It's going to make our jobs easier in the end. But we've seen what happened in Oregon, and that bill would have just the opposite effect. And it's really important for people to know too that it's you know, they can have hope. There is help out there. In fact, I think right now there's more help available than we've had in some time. We're working with some great partners in the recovery community, and if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to us.
This video was produced by the Brewer Police Department for educational purposes and raising public awareness. If you or anyone that you care about is suffering from substance use disorder, please seek out your local recovery center or dial 211 for services.